All right, so for you guys following along on my Total Annihilation repair, I decided to take the paint off the fiberglass nose cone, and I used a stripper that doesn't melt plastic or fiberglass. I let it sit for a couple hours and it seems to be scraping off pretty good. But I just wanted to give you an update on the nose cone here, because we're going to give it a nice coat of gold paint or something really shiny. We're going to fix this up really nice. But it's coming off a lot of elbow grease, but not too bad. So yesterday I gave you a small clip of some of the scraping I did. I'll tell you, it took a good 45 minutes or so to get this paint scraped off. This is what I used. It didn't seem to hurt the fiberglass at all. I don't know how it's going to do on plastic, but this worked pretty good. It softened it enough for me to get through the first couple layers, and then it kind of just scraped right off. So it was a lot of scraping and a big mess, but we got it done. So the nose cone is about ready for paint. There might be a couple little chips left that I have to do, and I filled a little hole and got a little bit of sanding. Aside from that, it's almost completely stripped. So we're gonna put a primer coat on today, let that dry real good, and then we got some really nice shiny copper kind of paint that we're going to use for the nose cone. Really make it stand out against the black bodywork. Gonna give it, you guys know all this stuff already, I know, but just want to go over a couple things. So we're ready for primer, and you know, I hang my nose cones. I'm sure most of you guys do that too, so we don't get paint on everything around the house, because then the wife will definitely not let us keep building rockets. So one thing I just want to mention is make sure you mask off the shoulder of the nose cone as best you can, because once you start building paint in there, you're not going to get a proper fit into the nose cone. So with that, and the other thing you want to, when you spray paint up and down, especially if you're doing a large tube, you don't want to keep spraying and hold the sprayer down as you come back up and down, because what happens is you get double the amount of paint while you're stopping and going up, and you could get a lot of runs. So I'm going to try to go with, you know, thinner coats, but what I usually do is just pump down, turn it off, up, down, do it that way, and that way you don't get that stop in between, and sometimes you get runs. Now we don't have the perfect paint conditions today. It's around 60 degrees, so I'm hoping this will be all right, at least just to get the primer on, because as anybody knows, we want to get stuff done and get out to the field. So this primer is pretty good. Fairly single coat will probably coat most of this without going too crazy and not letting it run. Pardon my back. And you can see this primer here, this is Rust-Oleum Ultra Cover Flat Primer. You can see it works pretty good. And this one especially, you want to be careful that you're not overspraying it, because it will run, because it's pretty thick as it is. So it looks like we're getting a really nice coat here. And I don't know if you could hear me turning them, you know, pushing the nozzle on and off. And it's not so important here where you're going past the unit, but if you got a long tube, you want to make sure that you're turning off your spray each time you go up and down. Okay? So we continue to spray this like this, and I think we got a nice coat. Now, the one thing I've always done, and I never learn, is it's never perfect. But the more you try to make it perfect, the more runs you're going to get, the more problems you're going to have. So we're going to leave it at that. Looks like the tip needs just a little touch. And that's it. So I'm going to let this sit here for at least 2 hours and let that dry. But it really came out good. It looks nice and smooth. I may not even have to sand it again. All right, so I just wanted to show you the nose cone. The primer came out perfect, and I'm using a metallic copper color, Rust-Oleum. Now it's supposed to be really shiny, but I think because of the maybe because of the primer, it's not exactly as shiny as the cap. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it another coat of this, and then I'm going to put clear coat on it, and we'll see if we can get that really shiny, because I'm trying to get like a nice glossy finish for the Total Annihilation rebuild here. So we'll give it another coat of this. I'll get some clear coat. I'll show you guys after that, so you're not sitting through me painting again. But it looks really smooth. The old paint came off. It's coming out really nice. So I'll keep you posted on the next segment here. All right, last video we were filling spirals with some wood filler. It's not, this came out pretty good. This is very smooth here. You can't really see it on camera unless I get in really close, but just take my word for it. It came out pretty good. I'm going to do a light sanding on this next. There's some spirals visible down this end, but considering the way it was, it's not too bad. And I may redo some fillets here just to make them look a little better. I don't know if you guys can see me, but that's not important. All right, so where we are right now is I primed this with sandable primer. I sanded everything down. It's very, very smooth. But I noticed my fillets are not that great. So I'm going to redo them. I sanded pretty heavy sand in the crack where the epoxy will sit. I use West Systems. I have a couple of pumps over there. This stuff works great. There's a lot of work time with it. So, you know, you get to take your time and make sure this stuff is working. So I know my neck is getting cut off by a fin, but I don't know if you can see the fillet here. What I'm using is a pretty thick popsicle stick, and I'm thickening up the epoxy with this high density adhesive filler, and just a teaspoon works pretty good. Try not to inhale this. I should be wearing a mask, so if anybody's using this stuff, wear a mask. Not bad. And you really want to mix this stuff really good. So I'm going to mix this for about 2 or 3 minutes here. Make sure it's blended in nice. And fillet, what I did was I measured a 1/4 inch up from the body and a 1/4 inch up from the fin. And that's my channel. And then once you slide your popsicle stick down and make it nice and smooth, I usually wait about, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, and I remove the tape, and it removes all the loose epoxy and the mess that it kind of leaves behind. And there's not too much sanding involved if you can do that. And remember, we talked about sanding. Nobody likes to sand too much, so really well. So I'm going to put some in here, and I just noticed I didn't tape off one section here. So I'm going to do that right now. Just bear with me here a second. I did mark it somewhere. And even if it's not perfect, as long as you got the tape on here to make a nice sharp edge once you're done. So what we're going to do is we're going to put enough epoxy in the groove here. And I'm a lefty, so unfortunately I'm blocking your view. And start running the, if you start running the popsicle stick, you'll see if you need more epoxy or not. You want to try to get it as perfect as you can to the top of the fin. And then what I'm going to do is, and I think you can see this, is I'm going to run this right down nice and slow. And you have to go back over it, you can. And I think I got more than enough epoxy here to make it almost to the end. And if you don't, you can pick up some from the scrap. And it does have a tendency, if you have the rocket positioned properly, it has a tendency to fall right back into the groove, where you can just keep sweeping, like so. And just move on to the next spot, because you'd be surprised if you keep trying to make it as perfect as you can. It gets frustrating, right, after a while. So I have enough epoxy here to finish this. So one pump on each side is getting me about 2 or 3 fins worth of epoxy, enough to run this down. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to go down like this. I have a lot on here, so I'm going to try to put some back in a cup and run down again. Yeah, I use a little bit too much here, but that's okay. We can take it and take it out of here. And see what the masking tape does? It does help prevent a lot of the mess. And we'll run it down one more time, and it should right to the end. And again, we have a lot, so this is going to run if we don't catch it. I want to make sure. Now you could run up the other way too. You wanted to do that, and then come back, and then we should have almost a perfect fillet. Paper towel just to make sure, because this stuff can get messy. But it's been about 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm going to remove this tape. And once I get that off of there, get it onto the paper towel, and you can see that's a pretty good cut. So we're gonna, I don't know how well you can see it, but take my word for it. Nice. It's actually got a perfect edge to where the epoxy meets the rocket and the fins. Look at that. So again, I just used a 1/4 inch. I'm just putting a little extra strength in the corners of the fins, which they call fillet. I'll take off this one. See if we can get it all in one shot, and we did. And it is looking very nice. I gotta reach underneath here, and no mess. Nothing to sand on the fins. Maybe a little bit of sanding if you want to really be picky with the edge of the epoxy, but with the tape, it really cuts that edge really nice. And look at that, very nice. I'm going to let the epoxy dry. Sorry if I'm screaming at you. I'm going to let the epoxy dry for at least till dinner time, just to make sure it is dry before I turn the rocket, and we don't want the epoxy to run in one direction or the other. So let me get over here on this side, the last piece. This is giving me a little bit of a hard time because I think I started to use different epoxy and it's hardened already. So let me get this off of here. There we go. All right, so there you go. Tip this in a little bit for you, but it came out pretty good, and we're gonna let that dry very well.